The very same church fathers that Dr. Brown quotes in his debate against Dale Tuggy are the very same ones that provide extensive commentaries on 2 Corinthians 5:8. They're the same ones that also teach purgatory. Let that reality sink in for you. Theodoret of Cyrus tells us, after death, we desire to be in the presence of God. Augustine says, amid the shadows of this life in which we are absent from the Lord, as long as we continually walk by faith, we should not consider ourselves desolate as long as we do not cease from praying. Let us read scripture in context and not take it out of context. Dr. Brown is assuming that 2 Maccabees is not scripture. Why is it not scripture if the ancient church were unanimous in every single council in teaching that it was a biblical book? By telling us he's going to stick to scripture, he is assuming 2 Maccabees is not scripture. And I can assure you, there's not a single council that gathered in the early church that ever excluded 2 Maccabees. None of them. Not one. You go from Rome, Hippo, Carthage, any of them, Trullo, well before we get to Trent. Never is it absent from any list, nor is it ever condemned by any ancient Jewish list. You don't find it there. That kind of theology is not correct. Dr. Brown has made a video admitting that purgatory is taught in his Line of Fire in 2 Maccabees, but he says it was not accepted, says it was accepted by the Greek church. No, it wasn't. He said the very same thing on Reason and Theology. The early councils were Latin ones. Hippo, Carthage, Rome. This is a Latin church. It wasn't only the Greek. It was a Greek, it was a Syriac, it was a Latin. It was all of them. They all accepted it. We're told that there is no place. We're not arguing that purgatory has to be a place. Nobody says that. It could be a state. It could happen in an instant as well, as Pope Benedict has taught. Pope Emeritus Benedict. We're told that the last trumpet will be transformed. No one argues that. In the very same vein, we agree with that. I've said it over and over. These people are alive, of course. Who said everybody needed to undergo purification? I was very clear. I read from Augustine. I read from Clement of Alexandria, the leader of the great catechetical school of Alexandria. We have got to be consistent. If you're going to quote some fathers to support you in the Trinity and the deity of Christ, what about the others? In one vein, they are on your side, and then in the other, you just forget about them and they don't matter, and you don't want to talk about them. To me, they matter a lot, and I think they're very important for tonight's debate. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for that rebuttal. All right, Dr. Brown, let me know you're ready, and I'll start your time.
I'm good.
All right, you got it.
So I just want to give a heads up. We may need to cut this short. If you wanted to debate the church fathers, it's a separate debate. I was asked to debate purgatory, and I specifically said, just because this is not a subject that I normally debate, and I don't normally debate church fathers, there are other folks that are very happy to debate this issue, that as long as we stayed with scripture and what we all agreed on as canonical scripture, I was happy to do it. I want to say this last thing. If the debate was what the church fathers said about purgatory, then we'd have a debate about that. If that was my aerosolization, I'd be happy to. When I say they're not relevant, I simply mean in the context of what we agreed to debate. So I'm very happy to move forward with cross-examination to go on as planned if we can stay with scripture. If there was a misunderstanding on either side and there's not a desire to stay with canonical scripture, then probably we've reached our climax here. So let's get that clarified if we can. All right, gentlemen?
All right. We can get that clarified now. Are we in agreement there? Are we good to go?
I was never once ever told that I couldn't utilize any church fathers as commentaries. Not once was I ever told that, Marlon. I was told whether or not is purgatory a biblical concept, and I heard debates Dr. Brown has done on the Trinity, on the deity, where he brings the fathers up over and over, despite them being biblical debates. I don't see why I can't utilize the fathers at all, yet we're talking about a biblical concept. All I'm doing is showing the way it was unanimously interpreted, and I'm unable to use a single early church father? How is that fair?
Well, let me explain. First, I hardly quote church fathers. To say I refer to them over and over in my debates is actually quite wrong. Read
against Dale Tuggy
on answering Jewish. Here and there, a few statements, but it was not my. I'm a biblicist, and I do not specialize in church fathers. But here's the issue. Every time you say, well, I was explicit, we're not discussing church fathers, church tradition, we're only discussing Scripture. So I was ready to exegete Scripture and to open up the Word. That's what I was ready to do. And look, in all fairness, why have a debate for something I'm prepared for and you're not, or you're prepared for and I'm not? What's the
I'm prepared for both. There's a difference.
Oh, okay, so then we can focus on Scripture. But here's the thing. You make all these statements. Everyone believed X, Y, Z. Well, I don't agree with that, but I'm not going to get into that. So it presents a very misleading picture for the audience if I don't rebut that. So
I will clarify one thing. Let me just clarify one thing. In my cross-examination, that's fine. I will stick with what is Scripture. When you cross-examine me, if you think that I'm not going to hearken to fathers, even as commentaries, I'm going to. So I will answer you.
That's fine. As long as you understand that
you can dismiss them all.
You can quote whoever you want. Yeah, but here's the issue. If I don't refute any of them, doesn't mean that what they say is accurate or that you even rightly quoted them. You might be
That's perfectly fine. People can do their own research.
As long as people understand that, if you say every one of them says X, Y, Z, I'm not going to deal with that. Folks can see whether you're accurate on that or not.
Yeah, in fact, I recommend people do their own research without a doubt.